Essential workers never left. The service industry has slowly returned, and now, with more than 40% of Americans fully vaccinated, it's the office employees' turn to go back.
Our office is open, and we expect a mandatory return after Labor Day.
While some may expect a new, reimagined workplace when they return, it may be more familiar than you think.
What about the COVID-specific changes that people will see in the workplace?
Employees are ready to get rid of the mask. People will respect distance a little bit more. We are absolutely not going to be as underneath each other as fellow human beings as we were pre-pandemic.
Raw Dog News.
You should not let anybody raw dog you.
Raw Dog News.
Do not raw dog. This is not... Raw dogging is not funny. This is a serious matter.
Raw Dog News.
Raw dogging is a term that is considered slang, and it means unprotected.
Welcome to
Raw Dog News.
I'm Marcus, and with me is my co-host Ashley, and obviously today we're talking about going back to work.
Hey man, that's not cool.
Hi everyone. Yes, going back to work is approaching all of us, unfortunately.
So whether you never left and you were an essential worker and you've worked your way entirely through the pandemic, or you weren't working at all, or a combination of the two, or you had your own business and you lost it and now you're having to return to the job market. It's all very confusing, or it can be, as to what to do next.
Baby, my whole work is to confuse you.
As people return to work or stay at work, the rules are changing about what's appropriate or how people are supposed to work closely together, whether they're vaccinated or not.
Missing her vaccination dates.
We're not vaccinating.
Think they don't work?
I think some multinational pharmaceutical company wants me to think they work.
May I? You know another really good business? Teeny tiny baby coffins.
Yep. There are a lot of questions about this. And what's interesting is you could mix this whole issue of is everything going to come back to the way it was pre-pandemic, or is everything going to continue to stay different now? Is it socially going to be different? But then on top of that, you mix that with many, many, many people who have, during the lockdown and the pandemic, gone through an interpersonal, some sort of, quote, great reset, unquote, where we realized we didn't like that department anyway. We didn't like that type of job anyway. Maybe we don't want to go back to the same thing. Maybe it's time that we do something else. So there's a lot of confusion with people personally right now who are realizing TikTok, shit's going to be over in September.
What ultimately this leads to is this idea of, if people are going to go back to work, what is their loyalty to their employer going to look like? How is that going to change? And how will workers who are going back to work try to be treated well, even if you don't like your job, if you hate your boss, you still need a paycheck, because even if you are unemployed at the moment, depending on where you are, that's going to be ending sooner or later anyway. So people are going to, whether they like it or not, have to go back to work. So what I want to talk about today is this idea of behavior and loyalty as an employee on the job, and how to make that better for you as a worker.
Right. And in turn for employers as well. It needs to be done for employers as well, or at this point, after such a long time away, employees are not going to want to stay engaged.
Absolutely. We will address employers for sure. Today I want to look at employees specifically, or workers specifically, regarding this idea of what is commonly known as positive reinforcement. So what is positive reinforcement?
Positive reinforcement is something that happens after a desired behavior that increases the likelihood that that behavior is going to happen again. And sometimes I hear people call that bribes. And my response to that is, are you a volunteer at your work? Because if you're not, you are also being positively reinforced for your work. So you come to work and you get paid. That is your positive reinforcement.
That is your positive reinforcement.
It increases the likelihood that you will come to work again the next day. So this is really just about, in a positive way, how do we increase desired behaviors?
Okay, so this woman is really speaking from the point of view of, an employer to an employee on how to get the best out of your worker. One obvious positive reinforcement is pay. You can't as easily positively reinforce your boss's behavior out in the open. You can't, you know what I mean? You can't say it. What are the things that a boss does that a worker could reinforce? The question is, what can you do to reinforce positive behaviors that you see in your boss? What does your boss do that you want your boss to keep doing? Maybe you have a boss who doesn't do things that are positive in your eyes, so you'd want to reinforce the neutral things that your boss does instead of the negative things.
Nice bosses that are good for your career development. Nice bosses that truly care do not make excuses. They give you constructive feedback, but they also are realistic and know that nobody is perfect.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing a lot of people notice as employers, well, smart employers anyhow, is if they treat their employee with a certain type of level of not just respect, but just enough, without getting too personal, just enough respect to let them know that they care about their comfort level, that they want to include them in certain events. Also, that they want their employee to actually help have a word on possible decisions or suggestions, because that in turn often engages the employee in a different way into some sort of, internal reward aside from just getting paid, where the employee thinks, okay, I'm making a difference, and this boss doesn't think I'm some dumb douchebag. He actually wants what I have to say, and he wants to consider opinions that I have about having to make things better. So that could be something that an employee would want to encourage the boss to keep doing by showing the boss that when the boss includes that person with these types of things, then the employee will in turn do extra work, go the extra mile, do something extra and nice that makes something for the boss just that much easier. And it can be small things, but little things like that to maybe trigger the employer into thinking, wow, if I include this guy more, he does more work for me and I get more for my money.
Exactly. And here's the secret to all of this. There's a secret. The secret is that when your boss treats you well and you perform at your highest ability or whatever the case is, do something a little extra nice. It shouldn't be directly connected to the thing. It shouldn't be like a quid pro quo.
There is no quid pro quo.
Like your boss does something for you, and then you're going to do something nice for your boss. Because this is subconscious. What you're doing is you're training your boss to keep being nice. So you don't talk about it, and you don't connect the nice thing to the thing that your boss did. Now, on the other hand, when your boss is being a jerk, you pull back a little bit. Again, not connected to the negative thing. You pull back in an unassociated way.
Right. So
that could, if you're a receptionist, that can mean something as simple as waiting to pick up the phone after, wait four rings instead of two. Little things like that. Do something like send a message more quickly than you would in a normal situation.
I experienced things like that as well, working in administrative. The more I was treated like shit, the more of the minimum to get my paycheck I did. The nicer I was treated, the more I went out of my way to pick up extra things for lunch, for my supervisors, and it all tied around in itself.
Right. So what happens ultimately is that this kind of becomes a habit, and without even knowing it, your boss suddenly likes you just a little bit more than everybody else. And the reverse might be true. So you can improve your situation. Everyone does this naturally, by the way, and it's used with raising kids, it's used with training dogs, it's used with employers. The difference is it's rarely spoken about in relation to how to handle a supervisor. And the way it keeps on working is because even though we do this naturally, when you make a point of recognizing it and consciously following these ideas, they get strengthened. And that's kind of the first lesson of this human resources solutions idea that we've been talking about for a long time now.
That's right. It's an ongoing project about how to make human resources a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. And because it's not just for the employers, it's for the employees as well. If the employees were more educated about the whole HR world, then they would be able to play the game too, in their own, like you were saying, in their own way too, such as making certain things subconscious, as opposed to black and white on the table, so that it just gets intertwined with a paycheck. Because it's not just pay that should be the positive reinforcement.
In a lot of cases, it is. That's the only good thing about a job sometimes. And sometimes that's not even good. So yeah, it just struck me as an interesting idea because of both of our backgrounds and the current situation with people going back to work and new circumstances. And it just seemed like the right time to kind of get some of our ideas out there that, are educated ideas, things that we know about. This is stuff that I don't usually talk about in the podcast and stuff. So I was actually searching for something that I had a lot of information about that I could actually share rather than just talk about whatever's in the news. But moving on, what else is going on?
The simple answer would be
Raw Dog News.
you should not let anybody raw dog you.
Raw Dog News.
Do not raw dog. This is not... Raw dogging is not funny. This is a serious matter.
Raw Dog News.
Raw dogging is a term that is considered slang, and it means unprotected.
Raw Dog News.